Hello, and welcome to
Hart and Hustle. I'm the Hart.
I'm the Hustle, and we're talking Texas teams and Texas talents around the Lone Star State. And today, we're focusing on the Lewisville.
I got to do the
Fighting Farmers.
Vanna White thing. Here we go.
The Lewisville Fighting Farmers and the Texas Longhorns. Now, we've already talked about the Texas Longhorns, and there's not necessarily an immediate connection between the Fighting Farmers and the Longhorns.
Stay tuned.
But stay tuned, because there could be in the near future. So let's go ahead and, well, first of all, where are you going to be this week? It's week 11 of the Texas high school football season.
You know what? I'm heavily
last week of the regular season.
I'm heavily in debate about where I'm going to go, and I think I decided to go check out McKinney and Prosper Rockhill. Prosper Rockhill has a defensive back who I really like in this class, Jaden Bradley. And then, of course, you know, McKinney has a ton of talent. Mm-hmm. But one thing that because I caught McKinney in a loss at the beginning of the season to Frisco Emerson. Since that time, they've called a freshman up to their varsity team to play offensive line, and I'm excited to see what he's bringing to the table. You know how I get, like, when you're talking about young players, and when you're playing at the 6A level and you're a freshman lineman, that gets my juices going a little bit, and I want to go check that player out and see what he's all about. Oh,
yeah, get an interview with him, you know, put him on the map a little bit.
Assuming that they win. I mean, Prosper Rockhill's not terrible.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I guess McKinney's in that Allen district still, right? That's a scary district.
You guys got something big planned for Texas football tonight this week.
Yeah, we do. We've got so we're doing things a little bit different for Texas football tonight. If you haven't heard the news, we're actually going to be doing a watch along. So we're not going to pick 6 spotlight games to tune into throughout the night. We picked one game, and that's the North Shore and Summer Creek game, live on Texan Live, and we're going to basically give it away for free.
Nice.
While we watch along with
expert analysis.
With expert analysis by Ashley Pickle, Greg Tepper, and Ishmael Johnson there.
Do you know who's calling that game for?
Michael Silvers. He's nice. one of our best guys down in the Houston area. So we'll be checking in with him at halftime. And of course, there are a couple of other games that are intriguing around the state that we'll be periodically checking into, you know, throughout halftime and stuff of the Summer Creek and North Shore game, but that's primarily the one game that we're going to be checking into. Now, there's not necessarily any implications in this game. North Shore is already pretty much locked up District 23 6A title outright, unless Summer Creek can go in there and wreak havoc. And then at that point, there could possibly be a 3-way tie between North Shore, Atascocita, and Summer Creek.
Then it's tiebreakers.
Yes, but it's also kind of that weird game because it's 6A and North Shore.
It's going up.
Will be
they're D1.
D1, and Summer Creek is probably going to be D3. D2. I've got college football on the mind. D3, D2. But nonetheless, it's a game filled with prospects. I'm excited to see Chad Woodford go against this nasty North Shore offense. So it'll be fun.
They got one of my favorite big dudes in the trenches, North Shore. Not a lot of people talk about him. Jacoby Isom. Mm-hmm. Dude's a bully. Yeah. Up front. But both teams have tons of talent. That's my Friday plans. My Friday plans are watching Texas football tonight. The McKinney game's on Thursday, so Friday I'll be dialed into the show. I have an obligation early Saturday morning, so I couldn't make it down to see that game in person, so I'm just going to watch it on Texan Live and watch Texas football tonight.
And you also have an obligation on Saturday night, too.
I do. We're going to be here for the playoff bracket reveal.
The bracket reveal show.
It's a good thing I got because that's what we're going to be doing. Both of us are going to be
we're going to be right here
with Carter Yates.
With
Probably
Carter
right
Yates.
here on this TV screen.
Yep.
So if you're watching this, you want to tune back in on Saturday night. Late night Texas high school football talk. Where are we going on the air at, like 10:30?
We're starting at 10:30 p.m. It will be the first time anybody has seen these brackets. We will be exclusively revealing them on the playoff bracket reveal show at 10:30 p.m. on Saturday night. After all the games are finished and all the brackets have been filled out.
There's all your shameless plugs for the beginning.
All your shameless
Heart and Hustle this week. Now we can get into the hard-hitting info of talking Lewisville prospects, and I had the chance to go watch them play on Friday against Denton Guyer.
You did, and man, that was a great game because we were checking in with that game. That was one of our spotlight games on Texas Football Tonight for Week 10. So we were checking in periodically throughout that game, and I don't know about you, but I was a little shocked about the result. I kind of had Denton Guyer penciled in.
The Lewisville defense
beating
got
Lewisville
after them, and that's, I think, their calling card.
That's their calling card, isn't it? It's Lewisville's defense.
Yeah, they were really, really good, and right out of the gates, Taelyn Mayo, class of 2027 cornerback prospect, who's, he's at least 6'3", got a break on the ball, almost pulled off an interception on Kevin Sperry's first pass of the game. Of course, Denton Guyer's quarterback, Kevin Sperry, is committed to Oklahoma. Mayo's probably, he's closing in on double-digit offers or has double-digit offers in the class of 2027. He's going to be a player that a lot of people are soon familiar with. So the Lewisville secondary is really good because they also have 2025 Oregon State commit Zephan Walker. Those dudes can really get after it. And you mentioned a name that you liked on tape too, and that was defensive tackle Xavier Fleming.
I think that this defensive line is very strong. I know everybody talks about the offensive line, which we'll obviously get to in just a second. But I think the defensive line is really strong too. They've got a couple of guys on there that have made some noise, like Xavier Fleming. I really like him, 2026 defensive tackle, who's got offers already from UTSA, and I believe North Texas as well.
He's going to get more.
He's only 2026.
Oh, but he's a freak show.
He's a freak show, and I also like defensive end Sean Oliver as well. Now, I believe he's a 3-star. He's got offers from Arkansas State, Jackson State, so he's going to go play ball somewhere. I believe his commitment I saw on his Twitter is November 20th, so we'll be on lockstep with that. Ryan Sewell's really good.
Their defensive front is amazing. I actually think that's the reason why they won the game, is because their defensive front really got after it at the beginning of that game. They were wreaking havoc, putting pressure on Kevin Sperry. They forced 3 Kevin Sperry turnovers, 2 interceptions, including one by Xavier Fleming that he returned 40 yards for a touchdown.
Told you he was a beast.
That was the one eye-opening moment for me from that game. I knew about Xavier Fleming coming into this game. He's 6'1", 290 pounds, 280, 290, something like that. So he's a big dude, right?
Yeah.
I underappreciated his athleticism. This dude, you don't see big dudes running like this. He hit the sideline on this interception return. Maybe I can find the clip on Texan Live as I'm talking about it to show you. He hit the sideline and scored that touchdown, but he also flipped over and provided some meaningful snaps on offense at wide receiver. So he was flipping over. He didn't get his hands on any balls, but he would flip over and do some blocking stuff. But this dude could run. And whenever 88 came in on offense, I was like, wait.
Hang on a second. Let me look at this roster.
Got my camera out and made sure I got some pictures of this guy running around playing offense. So
he's a beast.
I think he's one of these guys whose recruitment is probably going to hit warp speed because Lewisville is known to produce good players. Not only good players, but these blue collar, hard hitting type of guys in the trenches who are able to, be game changers, I guess. Well, he is a game changer. And that defense is good. It's just a really good defense because Guyer had a lot of really good offensive stars, but they matched them with their defensive play.
I think so too. And flipping over to the offensive side of the ball, I feel like in recent years, and you and I have talked about this, I believe, earlier this week, but usually at the quarterback spot, they've got a couple of studs. If you remember a couple years back, they were led by Taylon Green, who committed to Boise State, played a year at Boise State or so, and is now leading the way there at Arkansas.
For sure.
Now they're led by quarterback Trey Williams. What have you seen from the offensive skill positions that you've liked so far in this Lewisville team?
Well, in bridging that gap was Ethan Terrell, who signed with Jackson State. I think he was a 3-year starter there. So the guy who took over under center now is Trey Williams, a class of 2027 quarterback who is really at his best when he's picking apart defenses. He really needs to be accurate, but what is going to be his calling card as he transitions into being from a lower, underclassman to an upperclassman in that Fighting Farmers program is his decision-making ability. He's an extremely intelligent quarterback, high football IQ. He needs to make his progressions or go through his progressions really quick, make quick reads, and get the ball out quickly to be the type of quarterback that he wants to be. He's already getting colleges that are looking at him, so I don't need to like say, oh, he needs to do this to become a college guy. I'm just saying as he matures, that offense is going to continue to evolve because he's going to be able to do more things within that scheme. And of course, Geyer's defense is pretty loaded, so I didn't probably get to see like every week you're not going to have to
defensive line is scary. Yeah, talk about like Lewisville's defensive line. So is Denton Geyer's defensive.
Yeah, there was a matchup in the trenches that you can really get excited about.
Definitely.
And then I think that mentioning the Denton Geyer defensive line with Xavier Ukponu, Zane Rowe, Kyron Haywood kind of sets up the next thing is to talk about Lewisville's offensive front.
Because Zane Rowe went up against none other than 5-star, the newest 5-star in the class of 2025 in the DCTF Hot 100 rankings. And that is none other than Michael Fasusi.
Yeah, he is a freak show. Steve Sarkisian was in attendance to watch the game.
I saw your video that went kind of viral, by the way. Shout out to you.
Well, I mean, it was just a video of a helicopter.
A helicopter with Steve Sarkisian and our good friend Chris Gilbert coming in to watch Michael Fasusi.
And OU tried to match it. Of course, Fasusi is verbally committed to Oklahoma. He's a 5-star because he has all the qualities you look for in a 5-star offensive tackle. I think he has NFL upside.
NFL upside, yeah.
Also, tremendous person off the field. He dealt with, all right, I'll set the table for you. Steve Sarkisian and Chris Gilbert fly in the UT helicopter. They were at Lewisville visiting the school as well earlier in the day. Matched by OU bringing Brent Venables and Bill Biedenbow.
To the game.
Not in a chopper. I've got to point that out. Texas came in the chopper. OU didn't come in the chopper. So
amazing.
Texas gets a little bit of a victory from that regard. Like everybody notices it.
That's
Fasusi did say he was in the locker room getting taped up when the chopper landed, so he didn't get to see the actual chopper that was flying in for him.
Imagine being that good at football where you look up and you're like, nope, they're here for me. They're here to watch me play.
Isn't that cool?
That's really cool.
So Fasusi is committed to Oklahoma.
Yes.
And he said in the post game, as a matter of fact, he did the post game scrum. So there was at least 5 reporters asking him questions in the post game, and it was good to probably get that all so he didn't have to do 5 separate interviews. He could talk to all the reporters at one time who all had questions because Texas had flown in to see him. Obviously, that's going to create a storyline.
Cause some
they flew in.
Cause some
They're
chaos.
rivals, OU and Texas, so that's going to create a lot of questions. Well, Fasusi handled that remarkably well. He, on the fly, had his answers ready. I was just blown away by not only what he does on the field, but the attitude in which he carries himself off of the field, which, as you know, is very important to the whole developmental upside 100%. Or the developmental projection of some of these recruits. And I think that Fasusi's only starting to hit the tip of the iceberg on how special he can truly be, because he's a big dude, 6'5", 300 pounds. But he's still, I think he could play at 330 and you wouldn't even notice it.
Right.
His frame is extremely long. He's lean. He's athletic.
You can put him at multiple positions,
he can play tackle, guard, whatever. But as it relates to his recruitment, I think that Texas is embroiled in what I would categorize as a heated recruiting battle down the home stretch. He hasn't turned off communication with Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. So even though he's committed, he's still talking to these schools. And taking that into account, there's always a possibility that you could see a flip happen. What I know to be true in this moment is he's still listening. Texas is not going to take their foot off of the gas pedal in his recruitment. They're going to keep it all the way to the pedal to the metal, all the way until National Signing Day, and they're not giving up until he signs with another school. And I think that there's a good chance. This has not been verified. I think the first step in making sure that you could potentially see a flip from Michael Fasusi is, does he take a visit to Texas down the home stretch?
Yes.
Will he put his feet in Austin? If he does, all bets are off. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and give my prediction. I'm a big believer in watch what they do, not necessarily listen to what they are saying. And he did say Sooner for life in the post game. But if his feet touch Austin before National Signing Day, Fasusi's probably going to flip.
There might be a flip. Now,
sorry if I'm completely off base on that. And for people that are listening,
you've been doing this for a long time.
That's my read on the situation is if he does take that visit, then it's probably going to be a flip. And when somebody is 6'5", 300 pounds, you really can't take that quiet visit. Mm-hmm. They're going to know that Michael Fasusi's in town. That's probably going to get out. And that would be my first indication if I'm like an OU coach or OU fan of recruiting of like, oh, we got to be even more worried about this. If he doesn't visit,
then you can feel a little bit more confident that he feels comfortable in Norman and he's going to stay.
Right.
Okay, but here's my question. So last week when we were talking about, when we had revealed the 2 newest 5-stars that you had named, Jonah Williams and Michael Fasusi, I had asked you kind of what your criteria was when you were differentiating between 4-stars and 5-stars. And one of those was, if you label a 5-star, you are almost positive that they can immediately make an impact at that position, at that specific Power 4 program. Now at OU, he can do that. They're probably wanting him to start almost immediately, right? Could he do that at Texas?
Yes. Fasusi's one of these guys I feel like no matter, and even to give more clarity into like the rankings process and stuff, when you're school A, mm-hmm. you have an offensive scheme that you have to recruit to.
Yes.
Right? You have an offensive coordinator who has a scheme. Mm-hmm. He has a certain type of player that fits into each one of these positions. When I do the rankings as a scout, I have to rank the players devoid of any scheme, mm-hmm. right? Like, so whether they fit in naturally to the air raid or the pistol or whatever, I do it devoid of that. So I look at players like they could probably fit in multiple schemes, and that inherently is going to raise.
That's going to bump you up. Exactly.
Well, it's going to raise your value a little bit because you're versatile. You could really play within any scheme. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to it, you can only commit to one school, and you're going to be fitting into that scheme, and that could put them behind or put them ahead. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can't really account for. And I don't think you should account for it when you're looking at rankings, because players can also flip their commitment. So you could be a recruiting analyst or a scout and say, all right, this player committed to this school and he fits into that scheme perfectly. I think he's going to be a day one impact. I should bump his ranking up. Well, then what if he flips and then goes to a school where the scheme doesn't fit him as well?
Right.
Or the scheme changes in the offseason because the coaching staff changes. And that happens a lot.
All the time.
We saw it at Oklahoma this year because the scheme for Jackson Arnold wasn't as good in Norman as it was, at least underneath of Jeff Lebby when he committed there.
Right.
So, I mean, that happens all the time in college football. So you really kind of look at these players as where do they fit, how do they fit, and what do they bring to the table outside of a scheme? That's what I try to do anyway. I mean, I don't want to give like notes to people who are probably trying to come up and take my job in the future, but that's how
me?
Yeah, like you. Like that's how I
totally kidding.
That's how I look at it. We're a team. We can't do that to you.
Oh, of course. Never.
So
never.
That's how I look at it as I try to like rank the players is like I have to take scheme fit out of it.
Yeah, and I think
that's really good.
And that's important. I don't think there's a lot of people that think about that kind of stuff, when ranking players, they see a good player and they're like, oh yeah, definitely, like, why isn't he a 5-star? And it's like, well,
right.
There's certain criteria that they need to hit. But definitely something to watch to see if he does actually hit ground in Austin at any point during the rest of the season. And then let's go ahead and talk about it. The other 5-star that you ranked last week, Jonah Williams, who is committed to the University of Texas down there at Galveston Ball.
I wish we had the graphic still of the Red. So when we did the story, it was like a Red River rivalry.
You mean that?
Oh, there you go. So I do want to clarify. We have the computer. She has the computer today, not because she needs notes on players.
No.
So she can switch the graphics up for us.
Look at that.
So there's Fasusi, there's Jonah Williams, and the whole like thought process behind the day, so to speak, is they were Red River rivals, right? And they were both new 5-stars and all that. Well, come to find out,
that was before the Denton Guyer and Louisville game, where Sark came in on that.
That was Wednesday. By Friday, this could be a Texas and a Texas graphic, right? Like, so they could both be 5-stars committed to Texas, or they could both be 5. I guess really Jonah's not signed. He could be a 5-star committed to OU. I don't think that's happening. No. The latest intel on Jonah Williams is that he's going to stick with the Longhorns. Yeah. But this was just funny in my mind as I'm interviewing Fasusi in the background, because we kind of talked about it after we were done with the interview. I was like, we did the whole OU Texas thing. It's funny to think about maybe like it could.
You could be teammates with this newest 5-star. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm going to pull mine out for a note now because as it relates to Jonah Williams' recruitment, Texas today, the news came out that they had reclassified a 2026 player from Georgia to the 2025 class, and I apologize to this young gentleman if I get his name wrong, but Zelus Hicks is a guy who has now reclassified to the class of 2025. He was the number one safety in the class of 2026 nationally per 24/7 Sports. So now he's reclassified into the class of 2025. That gives Texas, as I see it, 2 elite safety prospects in this class. Now, does that player need a year of seasoning? I haven't got a chance to really break down his tape or look at him or know what he's bringing to the table. But Jonah Williams, I know, is a versatile defender. We rank him as a safety, but he can spin down in the ball. Yeah, he could play. He could play corner.
Well, and we talked about it last week. He scored touchdowns in 8 or 7 different ways last year. So you rate him as a safety, but dude can play pretty much anywhere.
Well, I gave him a hard time. I think he was listed with touchdowns in 7 different ways. But I said, look, man, you can't claim punt return and kick return as 2 different ways.
Totally can.
That's just a return touchdown.
You totally can. It's different.
I think it's a return touchdown. So I was like, no, I'm going to bump you back down to 6 touchdowns.
That's hilarious.
Take a little shine off of his. But
regardless, still awesome.
Dangerous return guy. Great offensive player. Ready to play from day one, I think, from a size, speed, and football IQ perspective. He's the youngest brother in a very athletic family, so he has that little bit of chip on his shoulder that's pushed him forward to make him a better player, more competitive, and that type of stuff. And I think that will benefit him walking into Austin on day one. Now, what is the question mark is the necessity of the position that they have. They had a really good defensive back class last year with Xavier Fleming and Kobe Black.
They did.
So there were some really talented players in that class as well. To me, the evolution of the Texas team underneath the direction of Steve Sarkisian is keeping these tremendous defensive backs at home that used to commit to Alabama, used to commit to Georgia, and used to commit to LSU and Ohio State. Those guys are now staying home, and I think that is what is going to make this Texas roster stay in the national limelight underneath the direction of Steve Sarkisian and in the college football playoff hunt year over year.
Right.
Very interesting with the college football rankings coming out this year. It's going to be wild. There are teams in it, like teams are in this thing that I think, let's just say what if? What if Texas had 2 losses right now?
Would they still be in the conversation?
They would still be in the conversation, in my opinion, because they're really good. They play in a competitive conference. So I think Texas with 2 losses would they definitely wouldn't be eliminated.
No.
But they might have made Texas A&M was the second school out with 2 losses.
Yeah, because now they've got 2 losses since they lost to South Carolina last week, which I would like to say. You
had a little bit of a prediction on that.
I did say that.
I don't know.
I did not say outright that they were. I said keep your tabs on it because it's definitely a trap game.
It's a trap, and it was a trap game.
It was a trap game.
We did kind of blow up Shane Beamer's offense, and that offense looked pretty good.
They did. They really, really did. Okay, while we're talking about Texas still, I kind of want you to give a little bit of an update on the only top 100 uncommitted player in the class of 2025. Okay. That's Michael Terry. And Texas, as we know, is very high on his list.
Exactly. They're in the top 3. It's Oregon, Nebraska, and Texas still. He hasn't made a decision. He still remains the top uncommitted player in the class. I really don't know what he's going to do. Obviously, Texas is the homeschool fit for him, local fit. Nebraska's done a tremendous job in this recruitment. He's taken multiple visits to Nebraska. I don't feel like that you go to Lincoln on your own dime or multiple times unless you're like serious about it. Right? That's my opinion.
They've got great facilities.
Yeah, they've got great facilities. They probably can make a pretty compelling pitch to him being the centerpiece of this class and not just another dude in this class.
Oh, yeah. I think
that's like what I'd be hanging my hat on if I was Nebraska. Oregon, on the other hand, has done a really good job in recruiting wide receivers nationally, and that's how I kind of see Terry fitting in. I don't want to call him a tight end. I don't want to call him an H-back. I think he's a jumbo flex wide receiver. And I think that's what I've decided in my mind, and that's how I'm going to think about him. We rate him as an athlete, but I'm thinking about him as being a jumbo flex wide receiver. He does have offers to play on both sides of the ball, multiple positions. There are people who have offered him at pretty much any position that you can think of on the field: running back, wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, safety. I think there are even some that think that he could be like an edge rusher too. So I mean, like,
he's an
athlete. He is a freak show.
He's a freak show.
How does Texas see him fitting within their schemes, I think, is the biggest question, because he does fill a similar role to the tight end that they have committed from spring to Caney. And that is something that I think that you should, if you're a Texas fan and you're concerned about where things are at with Michael Terry, I would say Michael Terry would be the cherry on top of this class. Did I say Michael Terry? Michael Terry would be the cherry. Michael Terry III would be the cherry
on top. Yes.
Top, right? Of a tremendous recruiting class that now I think is in the top 5 nationally.
It's got to be.
With the reclassification of the safety from Georgia. So, I mean, like, if you can get him, it's just adding to what I see as like an already loaded class.
Yeah, I think so too. Speaking of commits, I saw this on Twitter today. It has nothing to do with this podcast, but did you see that Matt Leinart's son committed to play at SMU?
I did not.
He's a quarterback out in Los Angeles, California. Yep, and he committed to play at SMU, so he'll play with.
Talk about a come up this year
for Coach Lashley and Derek King.
Yeah.
So
talk about a come up this year. SMU.
Jeez, yeah.
Even being the first team out, they're right in the hunt for the ACC championship. They could go from first team out to first round bye.
Yeah. Right, and it all depends on if they can beat Miami. Yep. Like, that's going to be a very interesting ACC championship game.
And Clemson didn't look.
No,
Clemson didn't look good this last week. So I'm with my unofficial powers poll. I've got SMU trending up, not only in state, with Texas A&M's loss, but nationally.
Which is really funny because I don't know if you watched ROF yesterday, but we did a segment in ROF yesterday that we had to pick one team that's been surprising and one team that's been a little disappointing. Obviously, I think a surprise to a lot of people has been SMU and what they've been able to do in the first year in a Power 4 conference. I definitely said that they were going to take a step back in the magazine, in the College Writers Power Poll. Yeah, and I regret saying that. Because
I mean, it's good to admit your mistakes.
It is, and then to be fair,
turn the page and get the next one right.
Right. I mean, and this is a completely different team. I mean, the defense has absolutely, not to get on a whole rant about SMU, but the defense has absolutely taken a life this year. And then now with the addition of Kevin Jennings at quarterback, like, this is a completely different team.
If I were you, I would preface my power poll thing with, like, look, I thought Preston Stone was going to be the quarterback, and now it's Kevin Jennings, and Kevin Jennings is like a completely different player than I think. Preston Stone's good. I think he'll land on his feet.
I do too.
I think that he'll push a program forward. I've always been a big believer in his skills, but what Kevin Jennings
brings a new dynamic to the offense.
Is completely different, and he's now, I mean, he's in the Heisman talk. So when you're talking about a player that is in the Heisman talk, you're talking about a player that's on a different spectrum.
Yeah.
And Kevin Jennings' arrival has changed SMU, not only the perception of SMU locally, but nationally.
Yep. And that actually brings us to our next topic, our last topic of the day.
Let's go. And here's the reason why we have the computer right here. The Texas OU graphic was just like a good surprise, but
it was. So
you did this, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sick.
She's a nut. So set the table for the fans.
Okay.
It's like what time on Monday you decided to just like start putting pen to paper?
So I was driving home from work after getting my nails done, of course.
which always gets you in the data collection mode.
It really does. I don't know why. I was driving home from work and I was like, you know what would be fun to do when I got home? Tally up every single Texas high school football player, former Texas high school football player on every single FBS roster in the state of Texas, which there's 13 teams. And I divided that number by the total number of players on their roster. And that's how I came up with which team. I ordered each team by how, percentage-wise, how much of their team is made up of Texas high school football players. And Sam Houston, to my surprise, came in at number 1 with 83%. I honestly thought before making this graphic that Texas Tech was going to be up there. Now, to preface this by saying Texas Tech actually had the most outright number of Texas high school football players on the roster with 98, I believe. Okay. Let me see, I've got this with 98. So they had the most, but they have more players overall on their roster than Sam Houston does. So that makes it to where Sam Houston, percentage-wise, is made up of more Texas high school football players.
So they edged them out by 3%. Mm-hmm. So this is the official Hart made in Texas graphic, made in Texas graphic. I'm going to point out some of my surprise. I'm going to point out my first surprise.
Okay.
My first surprise on this is Texas A&M at 63%. And you want to know why? Because I thought it'd be lower. Because they have really, really recruited nationally. Especially under Jimbo Fisher and even in the transfer portal last year. So in my mind, I thought that the Texas A&M roster would be closer to 50-50.
Yes, I kind of thought that too, which I also went through and I picked one player from each program that I thought has been the most impactful from Texas high school football. And A&M, I picked Torian York, which is Texas high school football player. The Temple tackling machine. I love that. But also, going back to that point, I was like, well, you can't pick Connor Wigman because Marcel Reed is the quarterback now. And he is from our state. They pulled him from the transfer portal.
Yep. And I think DJ Hicks will have something to say about that before it's all said and done. I'm going to say that.
That was hard. I was like,
hopefully, well, he hasn't done it yet. Torian York has been entrenched as the guy for 2 years. But come NFL draft time with a little bit more seasoning, they're in the same class. So, I mean, you have to give the edge to York.
Right.
But will DJ Hicks be able to catch up? What were some of your other surprises as you kind of went through this list that you thought, oh, wow, that I didn't expect that? Because the Sam Houston thing I can kind of get because they probably have to make Texas like their fertile recruiting base.
I also think they're in a really good location too. I mean, they're right outside of Houston, kind of, they're kind of by College Station. They're not too far from the DFW area. They're just in a really good centralized locations from some of the bigger
Texas
cities.
Kids will come there.
Correct. So I think that has a lot to do also with the way that Sam Houston has been recruiting in the state of Texas and what Casey Keeler has been able to do with that program now that they are FBS. I think UTEP was a little bit of a surprise to me.
See, to me, Houston too.
I think UTEP was just because there's a lot of, obviously that roster, there's been a lot of turnaround with that program. And now that Scotty Walden has brought in a ton of Austin P transfers, I kind of figured maybe there would be more Texas high school football players, but
give it time.
Really, they've done a great job with recruiting out of state as well. I mean, obviously they can pull players from New Mexico because they're right there. A lot of Arizona,
they recruited JUCO,
California, they recruited, right. So that was a little bit of surprise. Houston, I think to me was kind of surprising because they should, now that they are a Power 4 team, you know, and they've been able to compete in the past for a Big 12 title. So why can't they keep kids home? You know what I mean?
I think they will underneath the Willie Fritz.
I think so
but
too.
But I also want to say this about what Coach Fritz does and the way that he recruits. They are not necessarily going to be a team that gets pigeonholed down to like regionality all the time. I think that Louisiana and Houston are going to be their top recruiting
100%.
bases. Easy. Slam dunk. But they recruit a lot of guys with upside, athleticism, track background. They're not afraid to break the mold, so to speak. They're not afraid to look outside the box or think outside of the box as it relates to talent. They're not just going to recruit a guy because, let's just say, TCU offered him, right?
Yeah.
Houston's not just going to recruit a guy because TCU offered. They kind of fit into what they like to do from a recruiting standpoint, and I love that because I feel like Houston is the most under-recruited hotbed in the country.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
More NFL players come from Houston than almost, like there's tons of NFL players from the Houston area, especially as you zoom out and say greater Houston area and you account for Galveston and some of these other outlying areas of Houston. I'm putting that in, like the Golden Triangle. Yeah. That's all Houston to me. So whenever I look at that, I think that they'll be just fine. And they're like guys that fly underneath the radar in Houston that they can get and really transform into NFL players. And that's what they did at Tulane, not only in Texas, because they did a pretty good job recruiting Texas there, but with those Louisiana players who I put into that same bucket of these are like guys that fly under the radar nationally that not that very many people know about or less people know about, who have a high ceiling for development.
Yeah, I think so too. Going back to the Texas A&M thing really fast, they also have 142 players in total on their roster. So that total obviously will shrink that percentage more. They have quite a few.
I thought it would be lower. I thought it would be lower.
Right, exactly.
I think 63% for Texas A&M is pretty good, but sitting next to SMU, I would have expected SMU's to be a little bit higher because I think about them like from the high school perspective. You know what? Maybe
they're a big transfer portal heavy team.
Yeah.
They have worked their magic with the transfer portal and have really brought in guys to start at key positions almost automatically. But here's the thing also with SMU that kind of surprised me is that a lot of the guys that they bring from the transfer portal did play high school football in Texas. For example, Jahari Rogers.
Yep.
Do you remember Jahari?
Yeah, from Arlington.
From Arlington High School. The Colts, yep. From Arlington, he played for a year at Florida, and then he came back to the state to play at SMU. So, and there's a lot of those types of guys who played high school football in the state of Texas, went somewhere else, and SMU pulls them from the portal.
Yeah, I agree.
So I thought SMU would be a little bit higher, but
just because those guys coming back.
That's
what surprised me because 63% I can see A&M being lower, but I thought even Baylor. I thought Baylor would be because Baylor just doesn't recruit out of state for high school kids that often. So there has to be a lot of transfer players that are coming in to Baylor, or maybe their walk-on program is built more around out of states. I would love to dive into the middle of that data and kind of figure that out because when I think about Baylor's recruiting classes, I think, they're 90% Texas.
Yeah.
That's just how from high school, that may be true.
Right. Well, and they also have a smaller roster, too. They don't have as big of a roster as, say, A&M does or UTSA, which another point I want to bring up. UTSA, that's not shocking to me, how high that percentage is. I think Jeff Traylor has done an absolutely fantastic job. Obviously, he's a big part of the THSCA, Coaches Association. You can see him wear his hat all the time during games, which is awesome. Awesome representation. But
really, those 4 guys there at Tech, North Texas, 5, Tech, North Texas, UTSA, Texas State, and TCU. Those are the big THSCA guys.
Exactly. And I don't know if this is going to be like a big shout out to THSCA, but it kind of translates, Well,
you want to see those recruiting wins translate into wins on the field, right?
Yeah.
That keeps those guys employed, puts them on to better jobs where they can continue to keep that trend moving.
Right.
And by the way, not only is Texas Tech sitting with the most or the heaviest percentage of Texas players, the Made in Texas players, or the most Texas roster of any of the P4 schools, they also pulled off a huge win this last week.
Man.
So that was
eye-opening.
Iowa State was a huge win for Joey McGuire and his staff there. And those are the type of wins they have to continue to bring in top-tier talent. And that top-tier talent that they've been recruiting is looking pretty good on the field, including Taj Brooks. And
oh, my God. Yeah, Taj Brooks was actually the cover. I chose him as my cover photo. Manor grad. So
Corey Kelly coming back home, to Texas. All those are pretty big additions.
And they've got a big game this week
from Texas, because I got him mixed up with the kid who Caleb Douglas is from Texas for sure.
Yes.
I think Corey Kelly might be. You probably, maybe, if you can, too much data.
Man, I have a lot of data in my head right now, and that's probably why I need to get a little bit of sleep, because that took me a long time. But it was fun.
But this was an hour of Two recruiting junkies talking Texas on Hart and Hustle this week.
Yeah, and we said we were going to keep this short. Never happens. It never. Once you say the words, we're going to keep this short.
Yeah,
never happens.
It's over. This was our
so
longest show
it was
by far. All right, we'll do it again.
Fun. We'll
do it again next week. We're kicking around some new ideas to bring the show forward, as the season kind of starts to wrap itself up. Next week is the first week of Texas high school football playoffs. Maybe we can break down some of the top players who could win a state championship or something like that next week. That I like.
Fun. That would be a lot of fun, and how impactful they are or have been, to their program so far. So I like that. Let's do it.
Just keep it locked right here.
Keep it locked right here.
Thursdays, 2 p.m. Texas teams.
Texas talents around the Lone Star State. We'll see you next Thursday.